Good afternoon. These last several months have been a difficult time. They've been a difficult time for the community. They've been a difficult time for the Hamilton family, certainly. And they've been a difficult time for the Milwaukee Police Department. We're all familiar by now with the tragic events of April 30th of this year. Last night, we saw the conclusion of the long-term investigation into the then officer's conduct that day and his decision-making that precipitated these tragic events. Last night, the Fire and Police Commission voted unanimously to uphold my decision to fire Christopher Manney from the Milwaukee Police Department. Now, those of you who have covered this story for some time are no doubt familiar with some of the public statements I made shortly after this incident. I want to reemphasize some of them now. This incident was a tragedy for all involved. The Hamilton family lost a son and brother. A police officer would lose his job and the means to support his children. And some segments of the community would lose faith in the police department's ability to perform its function and to accurately and professionally evaluate its own conduct. Now, community support is essential in a free society for the effective performance of the police role. We must be perceived not only as fair and impartial, but as legitimate. The law must apply to us. And if the community is going to believe us when we assert in a controversy that a police officer's actions were appropriate and defensible, no matter how they might look to the untrained eye, we must at the same time be willing to identify those times when that conduct falls short of our standards, when it does not adhere to our policies and our training, and we must hold ourselves accountable. That is an obligation of a profession, and it's an obligation American law enforcement must assume to maintain its credibility and legitimacy in the many communities that depend upon us to protect them. I want to commend for a moment the professionalism of the members of the Internal Affairs Division of this police department. They're cops too. They bleed blue too. They care deeply about this profession and about this police department. And they worked very hard to assemble the facts necessary to get to the bottom of the decision-making process that culminated in a fatality last April. I also thank the Fire and Police Commission for their willingness certainly to accord ample due process to the appellant in this case, while at the same time taking the time to carefully evaluate the evidence before them and to reach a conclusion that validated the results of our investigation and supported my decision. Now, this police department is committed to the safety of the city of Milwaukee. It is committed to serving every neighborhood in this community and protecting its inhabitants from violence. Our officers are doing a fine job now, and I have no doubt that they're going to continue their daily professional efforts to deal with crime, fear, and disorder, wherever it is, to serve the public faithfully, fairly, and impartially, and to continue to uphold their oath, which they take seriously and to which they hold themselves accountable. Now, I'll be happy to take some questions.
The Milwaukee Police Association just sent out a press release that they're going to be speaking at 6 o'clock. We don't know exactly what they're going to say, but it says travesty right on the press release. What do you have to say about that ahead of what they're going to say?
Well, the Milwaukee Police Association has gone conspicuously on the record already with not being happy with my decision. That's what police associations do. I don't expect their support in this issue, and I certainly expect them to vigorously defend the interests of their former member. But I want to emphasize, and I can't emphasize strongly enough, that if we are going to be believed when we support the actions of officers when they're right, it's essential that we demonstrate the capability of holding ourselves accountable when those decisions are wrong.
Chief, they've suggested that this would damage the morale of the department. I'm sure, as you've said, it wasn't an easy decision for you either. Do you, A, think that's true, and B, if so, what do you do to kind of try to rebuild some of those bridges?
Well, I don't doubt that in some quarters morale has been damaged by this incident. Christopher Manney no doubt had friends on this job. He certainly had done his share of good police work in the past. And there's no doubt that there are some officers who on some level identify with him because of the reality of the police job is making critical decisions under stress with insufficient information. It's a daily lot of a police officer. And sometimes those decisions are going to end up having a bad outcome. The challenge of executive leadership is to draw distinctions and to evaluate decisions that have different levels of consequences. Now, I want to stress something that's very important. Every time a cop uses deadly force, somebody wants to put that cop in jail. That seems to be the default position for many of those who are suspicious of the police authority. Now, that's wrong. We are going to have calamitous outcomes sometimes. And just like the military that doesn't put junior officers in jail because they dropped friendly fire on another officer, their career is over. Just like a surgeon who has a deadly outcome of a surgery, we don't expect them to go to jail, but they may lose their medical license. There are going to be times when our wrong decision results in a tragedy and a death, even though there was no malice involved. And that's where we ended up here. Now, officers have used deadly force on my watch more than a few times. And so far, I have supported them in those uses of deadly force because the facts supported them. But their decisions leading up to that use of deadly force were also within policy. And we have to be willing to take responsibility for our decisions. And the cops know it. So I don't doubt that there'll be some grieving. I don't doubt there's going to be some commiserating. But so far, these police officers are still performing at a high level. And already this year, they've seized over 520 guns from dangerous criminals from the streets of our city. That's 100 more than they seized last year at this time. So they can be angry about the decision, but they're still committed to protecting this community.
As long as you mentioned it, can I ask about, we're near the end of the first quarter of murders. You've got plenty of work ahead, including on the murder front. What can you say to the officers at a time like this when they've got to deal with people that are shooting each other in the community?
Well, our officers are working in a violent milieu right now. There's no doubt about it. I mean, so far this year, we're not quite a quarter into the year. I've got a 300% increase in homicides over last year. Last year was our fourth lowest homicide total in 25 years, and this year we're on a dramatic pace. 32 homicides in 3 months. We've had 90 shooting victims so far this year. We've seized 500 guns from the streets so far this year. Our cops work in a dangerous environment, there's no doubt about it. And that violence is highly concentrated. Now we're going to do our best to continue to provide them the training and the support and the tactics they need to be successful. But we recognize that we're facing a significant problem right now, and we are going to be committed to getting it under control.
Chief, the mayor this morning applauded the changes in training that are coming out of this, especially requiring the CIT by the end of 2017 for all officers. Is that the silver lining here? Is there anything positive that can come of this? Is that, in your mind, what it is here?
Well, we recognize the following. And the thing that we recognize, that everybody's got to recognize, is right now police departments everywhere, but particularly in central cities characterized by high rates of poverty, have become the social agency of first resort for everybody. Okay, if you listen to the coverage of current issues that afflict the police, you would think there's no social problem so complicated it can't be fixed by more training for the police. Now, certainly, crisis intervention training is a useful tool, and we'll be one of only 2 departments in the country undertaking to train all of their members in it. But crisis intervention for training for police officers is not a substitute for a mental health system. The default position for mental health problems should not be dialing 911. And yet it is, in city after city after city. Now, we recognize our obligations as professionals to deal with whatever is presented to us right now. But if you look closely at the big picture, right now, our political system has delegated almost all of its social problems to the criminal justice system. And that starts with the police. And that creates a burden over and above the burden we have to fight violent crime.